Hey guys, it's Caven from True Champion Gaming here, and we are still actually in New Zealand, kind of doing our little holiday after the New Zealand Ascent, but we actually wanted to record some content still and get it to you guys quickly because we have the new hotness. So I took this deck to a third place finish at Ascent Auckland, and my teammate Isaac ran almost the same exact deck. Well, it's a one card difference. I'll point it out when we get to it. And he took a 5th place finish as well. Our teammate Terry took an 8th place finish, which is fantastic because top 8 is where you want to be in an Ascent, and we were able to somehow get that in Houston and Auckland for all 3 of our team members, which was really phenomenal. But so we'll be going over Terry's deck list later in the week as well. He took a Prismatic Fire Merlin list to there. So without any more wait though, let's just go right into the deck list. So we have Spirit of Water, showcasing my beautiful custom card from my wife Quinn that actually makes these. This might be the version that you're a little bit more used to seeing, but we got the cute spirit there, and we have Lorraine Wandering Warrior. So, you know, still am using Lorraine. I do think that with more time testing, we might have actually brought a different champion with a very similar like deck list overall. But we actually landed on this list maybe 4 to 5 days max before the event, which was definitely the most underprepared or undertested that we have been for a major event, but really felt like it was just quite strong. And yeah, I think there is even more that you can optimize with this list. We are running Lorraine level 2, and then we actually go all the way into Lorraine level 3 Spirit Ruler. This one will bring a sword back from banishment, which is very crucial, and we'll kind of talk about the champions in the main deck a little bit more. We are running the new Scepter of Lumina card. If this card looks a little odd on camera, it is actually because it is a proxy. So this is one of the cards featured from the new Proxies Vault. I'm not going to get too far into detail on that video or in this video, but yeah, phenomenal addition. I do kind of feel like this card overall in Water has actually been a little lackluster, but I do think in a specific strategy like this, you can really see its strength because honestly, the deck was pretty much built around this. So really, really fantastic card. Could not even consider honestly playing a deck like this without it. We have Lantern in the main board, not in the sideboard, because right now you can abuse an interaction of fracturizing your own Lantern, and you will end up with a card that you can tap because it's a fractal that is still receiving its abilities. So if you fracturize a Lantern, it is still turning off the graveyard elements. So you don't really lose anything yourself, and you can just basically shut down fire decks, mainly are the ones that rely on the graveyard. We do have a Drawn Blade in here. This was a card that we consistently talked about cutting, but definitely had its use in the deck, and I'm very glad I went into Ascent with this in the main board. You're not going to play it every single game, but a really good interaction is if you are in a more lengthy game, you can materialize this out, swing with it when you're still level 1 or level 2, and then when you go into your Spirit Ruler, you can bring this back and draw a card for leveling up immediately, which is really good. And it still will come back with 4 durability, which is important, and we'll talk about that too in a bit. We have your classic Sword of Seeking. This is usually the sword that you're going to bring out with your level up, but it's actually important to break a sword in this deck, so you actually might not want to go into it because of the 2 durability, which is odd because that's why it's such a good pick. But we are also running Ornamental Greatsword. 2 different purposes here. You want to get that +1 damage on that same turn from the effect sometimes, just because you need that math to like clear a board out or something. But the 1 durability, being able to break at the turn that you play it, actually can come up as well. We are also running a GCR, of course. No real reason to run Grail, as we have that ability to fracturize a Lantern, and Grail's biggest purpose in the metagame right now is to Grail Lantern. So we don't really need to run a Grail in the main board, and Ring just gives us exactly what we need in this deck. It is an ally aggro deck after all. And then we are running Fire Resonance Bauble, and I ran Water Resonance Bauble in the main. This was the only card that me and Isaac had a difference of, and honestly, there was no real reason for it. They both felt very good, and like each option had, you know, there wasn't any real reason to pick one over the other, honestly. And we just chose to pick slightly different cards, and it actually ended up working really well. We kind of just got lucky. Isaac played multiple wind allies in Swiss, and I played multiple water allies in Swiss. And fortunately, we were each running the other bauble, so that worked out pretty well until I lost in the semifinals to wind allies. But let's go right into the deck. So we have 4 Ghost of Pendragon, and this was a funny card to have in the deck because people weren't really used to a level 3 wind ally deck. Sorry, level 3 water ally deck. Well, they're not used to a level 3 wind ally deck either, but those aren't really getting played right now. But yeah, so I think people definitely expected us to be on the more standard water allies list, which is more of a level 1, level 2, but you don't really go into the level 3. You're just kind of like trying to swarm the board and kill them, similar to how Wind Allies does. But this card was just amazing and part of our only Crux package. So this is it. It's 2 Dispersion and 4 Ghost of Pendragon. So Ghost just like really got you value in the late game. There's a lot of regalia that you usually have on your board, and you can easily pop off 1 or 2 Ghosts. And if you're not returning your regalia with Ghost, you can use Dispersion to blow it up. So Crux Knight bringing back a sword means that with Ornamental or Drawn Blade, you're getting a sword back with 4 durability counters, or with Sword of Seeking, you're getting the sword back with 5 durability counters. So if you level up into level 3 to Lorraine and you play a Dispersion from hand, that's an additional 4 to 5 damage that you can do in the same turn, which is really crazy since it is a 0 cost. Another thing that caught some people off guard is this is a fast action. This is a really uncommon card to see in decks right now, and so people didn't really know how to play around this. I used this multiple times throughout the tournament to kill things on my opponent's turn when they thought they had lethal, or just take care of a problem, or just use it as an extra push to burst them down, because that is this deck's biggest strength. Wind allies can swarm the board and push a lot of damage and take control of the board. This deck can fluctuate between a swarm strategy and a burst strategy, and the main reason for that is the Scepter of Lumina. But yeah, Dispersion was a very, very clutch card. 2 is the right count. I very often will just banish this card for memory cost early in the game, because it's a really great card, but it's not as important as other cards in the deck. So I really liked the count of this, but both me and Isaac felt that this card hands down just won us some matches. Then we move into a big part of the deck, which is 3-drop allies. So this deck plays 3-drop allies like crazy. Compared to Windswarm, Windswarm sees a lot more 4-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 5-drop technically because of Phalanx Captain, even though you're never really casting it for 5. But this deck is almost exclusively 3-drop allies. So 3-drop, 2-3 is the theme. Esteem Knight is in here because we are playing every 3-drop 2-3 that exists. And another one that exists is Lurking Assailant. This card has already shown to be phenomenal in the meta. People also forget about that level 1 plus retaliation thing, which I used against some people, even in Top Cut, I think, to take out a game. Or it was the last round of Swiss, day 1. I only won a game because my opponent forgot that I could retaliate with Lurking Assailant, and it led me to close it out. Then we also run Frostborn Paladin. Don't get confused by this card. You barely ever use it for the unenter effect. This is just another 3-drop 2-3 option because we need every single one that we can get. So, you know, if you have an Esteem Knight and a Frostborn Paladin in hand, and you have no Floating Memory Engrave, definitely play your Esteem Knight first, because they're essentially the same card, except for Paladin will allow you an optional effect sometimes that you can use. A really nice thing to do is like Savage Slash if you're playing against a Merlin and you're worried that they're going to eat it up by like going into level 2 next turn, and then just Paladin and get that buff. So it can come up, but it's mainly in here just because we need all the 3-drops we can get. Next we have not exactly a 3-drop 2-3, but it's going to be one of your best 3-drops to see. So Gildas is what lets you really go for your damage. You know, like I honestly felt like if I drew Gildas in a game, the game just got 10 times easier. Having all the damage from this card and your opponent feeling like they just had to do everything that they could to kill this, and you having a little bit more options for answering that in this deck was just really good. So yeah, Gildas, if you can see him, you're going to probably win that game. And then this is low-key one of my favorite 3-drops in the deck. So this is your least aggressive option. I still did play this card if I had it in hand against things like Rye, even though I knew I wasn't going to use the effect. I just needed to put every ally I could on board. But playing this card against some decks is almost just an auto win. So if you're going against a flame sweep deck or, well, anything that's going to sweep your board or anything like that, this allows you to put down every single card from your hand each turn and swarm the board while also just having this answer there at all times. So really, really fantastic card, and you know, I was pretty much just super happy to see it every single time I drew it. And our last 3-drop ally is Dungeon Guide. So this card is honestly very, very crucial to the deck. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, this deck can really flip-flop between Swarm and Burst. So Dungeon Guide is usually going to be your key factor on whether or not you're going to employ the Burst strategy. So being able to materialize Scepter and then immediately go into a Dungeon Guide for level 1, level 2, whatever level you've already been on, gives you a huge amount of burst damage that your opponent may not be expecting. Obviously, people are going to be working around it a little bit more now that 2 decks made top 8, but I could definitely tell in the tournament the fear in my opponent's eyes when I would materialize Scepter and then play a Dungeon Guide and they started racking up exactly how much damage was coming their way, and they're not really used to water doing that much damage in one turn. So yeah, Dungeon Guide was just an absolutely crazy card. This doesn't really exactly count as like a 3-drop ally in the deck, but there are, I think, 23-drop allies that you are good with playing on like a turn 1 going second, which is really, really good against a variety of decks to either swarm the board or fight for board control or something like that. So this deck does run more than 23 drops, but we kind of like had that in mind for counts on like cards that we want to play on turn 1 going second. So it's the most ill-fitting 3-drop ally in the deck, but it has one of the biggest purposes in the deck. Then we have a card that it's okay. Basically, we needed some 2-drop allies in the deck. We searched for more 3-drop allies to put in and didn't really like them. You have your classic water allies cards like Snow Fairy and Lunette, and they just felt a little bit too situational and not consistent enough. So we put Weaponsmith in here because we felt that it was the most consistent 2-drop that like we could get some utility out of because we do run Dispersion. It was really great to materialize Sword of Seeking on level 1's effect and use Weaponsmith to get it to like 3 or 4 durability, bring out a Drawn Blade or an Ornamental later in the game, break that, go into level 3, get that back, and then Dispersion someone for like 7 or something like that. And it can happen sometimes. So you do want to be careful with this card because like I mentioned earlier, you do want to break one sword and you might not get the chance to have an extra materialization for another sword before you go into level 3. So just be a little wary of like how you're using this card. I know when we ran this in Wind Allies, I would commonly, if I had 2 swords with 1 durability each, I would go like 2 durability, 2 durability the next turn, or if I had 2 weaponsmiths out, like balance them and stuff. That way if an opponent did fracturize a sword, I didn't have all my eggs in one basket and lost all that sword's durability. But because you're okay with the sword breaking in this deck, you do want to change how you get that out. So yeah, basically was it just in here because we thought it was the best 2-drop ally besides Banner Knight. So this is our only other 2-drop ally in the deck, and you know there's obvious reasons why you run this card. Yeah, it's just a fantastic card. Then we have our non-allies. So this deck does play quite a lot of them. Overall, this deck did play less allies than our Houston deck because that was more of a, I'm going to swarm every game and that's that. This deck does have different options. So we do run 4 Inspiring Calls. And, you know, this honestly, you're usually, I felt like most of the time I used Inspiring Call. About 50% of the time it was on like 2 allies max. And another 50% of the time I was doing this in my opponent's end phase or before Recollection on my turn because this deck naturally wants to hold up cards in hand to have answers and slow down your opponent, you'll find yourself with a lot of cards in hand. So you can do something like play one ally on your turn, sit there and have answers, and like just kind of slow down the game state, and then do this before recollection just to keep filtering, but adding a little bit of aggressiveness on your side of the board. Or because leveling up is actually really important in this deck, but you can run out of resources pretty fast, because not only do you have to level up in this deck, but you also want to go Scepter before anything. That's taking one extra card out of your rotation. Especially if you're playing against something like Wind, where you don't even have the Wind Bobble for an extra draw. Just doing this as a way to level up but still replace the card that you spent to put cards in memory in your opponent's end phase is just phenomenal, especially because you can do it at fast speed. So you can bait having something that's going to throw your opponent off, and they might play their entire turn around it, and at their end phase all you just do is Inspiring Call and then level up and kill them or something like that. It's just a really cool combo. So don't get too wrapped up on this card. You shouldn't be trying to get like max value of like giving 4 allies +1 attack. That's just not normally how you'll play that card in this deck. And then we have our only attack card in the deck, which is Savage Slash. So this card was absolutely phenomenal, and I wish I drew it more. I barely saw this card in Auckland, and I definitely missed it. This is your best answer to stealth units like Lurking Assailant, like Dream Fairy, like Snow Fairy. We had more options to kill those in the deck before, but just felt that there were a lot of other cards that were needed over those. And also just using this to give a little bit more aggressiveness while not really exactly losing cards, as long as it's not getting eaten up by something like Raccoons or Merlin. If you're going for that burst Scepter level up strategy, like the turbo level up, this is just the perfect card for it, because you're going to be aggro and doing that strategy at the same time. So yeah, Savage Slash is just a phenomenal card. We have the classic water spells up next. So for Frostbind, yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. This is essentially a tempo deck, and you can use this to control the game state. So really good card there. We ran 4 Fracturize. Now this is an odd card, because this most of the time felt like the worst card in my deck. I was usually unhappy to see this in my hand. However, fire decks are very prevalent in the format, and this can almost be an auto win button against many of them. So you do kind of just have to play them. I could see maybe running 2 or 3 in the main and sideboarding 1 or 2. But since we went with an 8-card material deck sideboard, we chose to just have the counts in the main that we needed for the entire event, if that makes sense. So yeah, really, really good card, but I could see that count changing. Another card that is almost just game winning sometimes, but you don't really want to see it, is Song of Frost. So again, against certain decks, this is the card that they fear. Basically, if you have this in your hand, you just win. And if you don't, it's really bad news for you. But using this to just keep an ally alive or something might seem like an okay play, but I felt like usually was losing you too much tempo and resources. I guess not tempo because your ally's staying alive, but it just felt like an awkward card to play. But again, it's just game winning in some circumstances, so you kind of just have to play it in the deck. And then our last cards in the main deck were 2 Glacial Guidance, which you probably are going to have to pause the video and read this card. Not too many people play it. A really, really cool trick with this card and with Song of Frost is that each card can end the combat phase. And if you successfully end the combat phase, any other things that were on the stack will no longer be on that stack. And that might sound really confusing to you. We're gonna do a rulings video from a lot of things that seem to be miscommunicated at Auckland and in other tournaments and just in general. So we'll touch on that a lot more, but essentially, long story short, if you attack with an ally and in response to the attack declaration, your opponent plays Resolute Stand, and then you respond to that with Glacial Guidance and end the combat phase, or Song of Frost and end the combat phase, that Resolute will no longer happen. So it's a little it's a little difficult, and as more people are aware of that interaction gets worse and worse because people will no longer wait for attack declarations to happen. But yeah, I mean, I think Isaac did it to someone in round 1, and that helped him win the game. So it's definitely a perk, but even without that interaction, these cards still are strong. This was our biggest flex spot. So we basically had 2 cards rotating throughout the deck. We had Sudden Steals in, Snow Fairies, Lunettes, Deflecting Edge, Glacial Guidances, Freezing Hail, just like a ton of different options that we were all testing, and they all just felt exactly the same. None of them felt like they were performing incredibly well, and it's a 2-card slot in the deck as well, so you know, you don't draw them like too often. So this is the most changeable card in the list, I would say. And yeah, whatever spice that you want to put in to make it your own flavor, you know, definitely experiment with it. There's a lot of good options that you can put in. Let's go ahead and go to the side deck to finish the video off. So I had Wind Bobble in my side deck. Isaac obviously had Water Bobble in his side deck, and that's just the easy choice to swap out when you're choosing what cards to take out of your material deck. We had Chalice of Blood. This was an interesting pick. This was the most last minute change that Isaac and I did to the deck. So we made this change literally the night before, or the day of that we left for our flights, I believe. And 0 testing into it, but we were just unhappy with our last side deck option. And I just kind of like the idea of playing this in decks that aren't Rye, because people really only respect this card in Rye. And I just kind of wanted to throw some people off and have a really generic card in the sideboard as well, because we needed more generic cards. And I never actually got to use it. I don't know if Isaac did, but funny enough, I actually had, I think it was a Water Allies player. It was some sort of Lorraine or Merlin, but I believe it was a Water Allies player that actually played this against me. And I was so jealous of him and the fact that he got to do it against me and took me by surprise. And I can't remember if he won the game or not, but I just remember it being really cool. So I think more people should respect that card in non-Rye decks. Then we have a Smoke Bombs. Incarnate Majesty and the Majestic Spirit is a huge problem for the deck, and essentially your plan against Merlin is to swarm and beat them before they can bring it out, but this is your backup option. Hopefully you have some 2-attack allies on board. You can Smoke Bombs it and swing those through. They're still going to take half damage, but hopefully it's just that last little bit of damage that you needed to do. You can also use it in the allies versus allies matchups to try to maintain board control by keeping your own allies alive. Next we have Safeguard Amulet. This was meant for obviously anything that did spell damage. So Fire Xander actually, this is a really good option to bring out. Fire Merlin, it makes their crystal double fireball turns take a lot longer to do. And Rye, you already have a really good matchup, but yeah, it was just a generic card to give you a little bit more defenses. We also had Terrafring. This was mainly meant for the Wind Allies matchup, just trying to keep your own board alive a little bit, because they usually main deck Terrafring, and if you're not siding it, you're going to lose that battle pretty hard. Next up, we had Eye of Argus, another card mainly targeted towards Wind Allies, but any ally deck, since waters are mainly running Snow Fairies, and any ally deck is running Lurking Assailant, Eye of Argus is just a really good option. And then to finish off the deck list, we had Quicksilver Grail and the Tithe Proclamation. So again, kind of cards that the whole side deck felt just a little off, honestly, but we did find value from them. I do believe that the sideboard can be improved. You know, I brought this in one match against Rye, and it did actually win me that game. So, you know, it had its purpose, but Tithe Proclamation absolutely is weaker now. And the main reason that we wanted Grail in the deck was actually so that we could put Grail Lantern in for those matchups that we do need it. Because if you are facing against an Erupting deck or a Fire Aggro deck and they draw really well, and you don't see your Fracturize in time, it's basically your backup option is to just go Grail Lantern, buy yourself one more turn. Maybe they, you know, kill off your Lantern after you Grail it and you're no longer able to Fracturize it. But the thought process was that if they're taking all that time to do that, you can hopefully kill them on the crackback. Because at the end of the day, this deck always has the option to go aggro. It is that perfect balance of tempo / mid-range where you can control the game if you want. You can also end the game. So for example, my semifinals match in Top Cut, we took 2 hours and 45 minutes to play a match, which was insane. Probably the longest match in competitive GA's history so far. And it was me on this deck, obviously, versus my opponent on Wind Allies. However, not to put Gaz under the rug, but our 3rd and 4th place match for me versus Gazmus, who was on Fire Onsol, that match probably took about 10 minutes, and it was absolutely nothing about his skill. It was just the matchup where I was able to do things like Song of Frost and Korhazi Trapper against his Flame Sweeps. He wasn't able to really do anything about my game plan, and I just swarmed and killed him. So, you can really do the opposite ends of the spectrum. Like in my semifinals match, I had 12 cards in hand, and I was just draw passing most turns. So really, really versatile deck. I will say, I do believe this is a pretty complicated deck to play, and it is very unforgiving. So very, very fun though. Probably one of my most fun decks that I've played in GA so far. So definitely worth trying it out, getting some reps in, bring it to your locals, change up the list a little bit how you like. Like we said, I don't think this is a completely refined deck. Like our Wind Allies list from Houston felt a lot more unchangeable, but I think there's a lot of fine tuning that can be done. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for joining. I know it was a little bit longer of a video today, but I wanted to explain a lot since this is also a little bit more of an intricate deck. So also, if you are near the Michigan area, we are doing a regionals on December 16th. Gonna have a ton of goodies there, including bonus giveaways and stuff, and we're gonna make sure it's a good time for everyone. So definitely check those out. You can find tickets with all the event details and everything, and a link to buy them in our description below. So we'll see you guys in California for the next Ascent, and hopefully Team True Champion Gaming can continue strong. Peace.